out was this acceleration of change after a certain point in the modern time. There seemed to have been sort of a status quo for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the work of Jacques Vallée and others who've delved into the legends, the myths, the religious lore, the historical records, in fact, from ages before ours, and see that there were these intermittent accounts that fall within the realm of the UFO phenomena, it was fairly static as far as the acceleration of activity until the modern age.
Huh.
And then we see certain kinds of activity beginning, and then beginning massively, and then those becoming more and more complex, leading up to the massive numbers of people who I believe are telling the honest truth about what they think has happened to them, reporting honestly on events as they've perceived them, and the numbers are staggering.
What do you think all this is headed toward, this increased awareness, even this evolutionary change? What is it headed toward?
Well, again, I'm having to speak from a fairly educated opinion, but certainly no one in this field can claim to have any hard and fast answers from which to work, so we're all making guesses. One thing we have to be committed to is, I think, researching the widest possible body of data instead of being very selective because of personal biases or personal preconceptions about what we're going to consider. But the problem is, when you put it in the box, you don't have a good fit. If what's going on here were known to someone, it would be worth the rest of the world's attention, certainly, to know what the answers might be. I don't have any. We were talking about theories a while ago. Certainly everybody's got a theory. I would like to comment on something you did say earlier, though, about
Sure.
Perhaps these creatures might have been our creators.
Yes.
I think probably if we wanted to examine a variety of evidence types, including some of the more ancient records, we might find that they could be considered more correctly perhaps interloping farmers.
Interloping farmers.
Well, the way that we, as a species, the human species, has taken over wild animals
Yes.
time and again and domesticated them and
Yes.
genetically altered them for our benefit.
Well, that's true. While we certainly did not create cows,
No,
we
we
could be considered their farmers, couldn't we?
Exactly, and we've genetically manipulated them through the centuries through selective breeding programs in the beginning, and
Yes,
then
we have.
through more laboratory-type methods in the recent years.
All right. We use cows for food.
Right.
While you don't rule that out with regard to how the aliens may be using us, what is your best guess, based on your research, as to what they're doing with us?
Well, they're doing a variety of things with us, and this is what makes it hard, Art. We know they're taking certain kinds of substances from us. They take sperm, they take ova, they may well be taking fetuses, if we can trust the perceptions of the people who've reported this. They take body fluids, they add fluids to our system. They take flesh samples, hair samples. They take energy. In fact, one of the more common things that I began to run into when I was making connections with many other cases of abduction reports was a phenomenon that some people call being vacuumed, where you're in a totally normal physical energy state, and then as if a switch were thrown and a vacuum sucks all your energy out, you totally are without any energy. It's more than exhaustion. When it's happened to me, I couldn't even move my lips to talk. And it took 15, 20 minutes of recovery time to regain energy. So they certainly are taking energy in some way.
All right. I've talked to a lot of people who call up who think they have been abducted or tampered with in some way, and they have awakened in the middle of the night to a paralyzed state. Is that a common report?
Sure. It's a common report. They either wake paralyzed or become that way soon after perceiving entities or a light in the room. Yes. But if it were all just happening in the bedroom, I think we'd have a very different phenomenon. You know, of course, from the other calls you've gotten that it happens to groups of people at the same time. It happens
Yes.
in the middle of the day, on the highway, in town, at parties. So we're not dealing with something that's easily explainable as a night phenomenon, but that does seem to be a very, very common occurrence.
And again, your view is what? That there's a genetic reason, perhaps, for all of this experimentation?
I think part of it may be, given the kinds of reports we have, that they are certainly doing something that's quite physical in both its aim and its procedures, that this is not a spiritual phenomenon primarily, as some people would very much like it to be. The purpose of a spiritual phenomenon is not being served by a number of procedures that are reported over and over again in the abduction scenario. These are very physical concerns, brain operations, blood alterations, implants, for instance, which would really have nothing to do with a spiritual phenomena.
That's true. What is the state of the research into these implants? I know that we have actually some physical samples of implants. What is the best available evidence? Do you know?
Oh, very little, to tell you the truth. The best available evidence I've heard recently has concerned reports of analysis into a number of potential or alleged implant objects, but so far nothing has turned up that is easily explained. Some are completely terrestrial materials, but that still doesn't explain who made them or for what purpose. Others appear to be just anomalous in the sense that they can say what it isn't, but they can't really say what it is, nor, in fact, that it's extraterrestrial in origin.
All right. Is it necessarily extraterrestrial in origin? And I go back to my visit last week with Dr. Mack from Harvard. He said that, look, a lot of these implants that have been analyzed have turned out to be very terrestrial in terms of the materials in them.
Exactly.
Dr. Mack is not blind to the possibility that these creatures, whatever they are, may come from either another time or another dimension, but in fact from this Earth, on some plane, from this very Earth. And if that would be true, it would explain the materials being common to this Earth.
Certainly, if they had been interacting with our species for a long, long time, they would know very well the materials on this plane or this Earth.
Sure, they would.
Wherever they come from, if they came from another planet, if they came from another dimension, if they came from a dimension parallel to ours on this planet, those are all possibilities because we don't have any answers, and they certainly behave as if they dimensional hop. In a sense, they manipulate dimension. They manipulate time. There's no doubt about that. And their physical activities, as we've observed them, show they manipulate spatially.
All right. In your book, Taken, you go into 8 separate cases.
Right.
Apparently, all women.
Yeah, this time around, I focused on 8 different women's cases. I thought it gave one of the points of doing this project was to give an adequate sampling of in-depth reports, so that correlations and comparisons could be made. And I thought it was one more factor that was part of the correlation process, that these cases all happen to be women. The book I'm working on now that should be available by December concerns one man's case. So I don't just work with women. I don't want to leave that impression.
All right. And by the way, there are very few by number women who are UFO investigators or investigators in your field. Most of the people investigating in this field seem to be men. Have you noticed that?
Of course, yes. And it's not been easy to be one of the few women in this field, I'll have to say that, although some people have made very good efforts toward me. But still, I think not only do I have that strike perhaps against me, considering the numbers of women who aren't in this field, but also I have a strike in some people's eyes against me because I have had personal experiences that in some people's thinking is a contamination that means I shouldn't research. And I guess I could see their point of view, but I think on the other hand it gives me additional advantage in researching.
Well, if you really had the experience, and I went 48 years of my life, Dr. Turner, without seeing a UFO and then finally saw one almost a year ago, it compels you, and so I can easily understand why you would dive into this research. It's not easy. What have your colleagues said?
Academic colleagues?
Yeah, that's right.
Very little. In confidence, several have talked about personal sighting experiences, but never publicly. I left the area where I was teaching in 1991 was the last semester I taught in the spring, and I moved to another state, so I really haven't been in contact with them since then. What they may think about it now, I can't tell you. However, they are among the rest of the population in this abduction statistic field that there are people at the university level who have experiences, just like there are, in one case, probably the most extreme as far as deprivation I know, a case in the Ozark Mountains of a family so remote and so without access to what we would think of as contaminating material. They had no electricity, no television, no any really contact, very menial labor, and the woman was totally illiterate and couldn't read. And yet her experiences parallel those of the college professors and the doctors and the artists and the housewives who also have this.
You said there were a number of things, or at least a few things, that you could nail down as certain about this entire phenomenon.
Well, there are certain things that I have now, to my satisfaction, I accept as fact rather than as theory.
What are those?
Well, so some of them include, for instance, the fact that we don't know, there is no evidence. It is a fact we do not know where these creatures come from or what, in fact, their true nature is. In other words, I have not found any of the theories to explain their origin or their nature to be overwhelmingly proven by the data.
Let me try approaching it, though, from the other angle. Are you convinced, Doctor, through your research, that this is a hidden hand, that there are aliens, no matter where they may come from, who are here?
Yes, I have personally experienced it. It's a matter of knowledge and experience with me, not even a conjecture.
Not even a question?
No question.